Hello and welcome to another episode of The Modern Nerd. I am Sir Slice13.
I'm Sir Sleepy's Merchandise.
What? Okay. And I'm GJC.
And
I guess
we
I'm
are
always sleepy GJC.
and we are
Yeah,
always napping. So
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we are back. Sorry for the hiatus. I was out sick for a while and then just, work happens for everybody, and so now we're finally back and we're doing the whole thing. And it's been a while, so we're gonna go over I'd say a bunch of stuff, but it's really mostly just a bunch of House of the Dragon. And then we'll come back and do another one on, She-Hulk and everything else that's happening, a proper Lord of the Rings one if we all decide we want to watch it and finish it. And we're going to do a small recap of D23 today. It's only going to be a couple of things on the D23. There
We'll
was a
dive
lot
more
that
into
happened.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
on the next
it was
episode.
mostly like a lot of Disney stuff that I saw that was announced, and
Yeah.
then Marvel had a few things. So let's as always, I want to start off by saying thank you, Dan, thank you, George, for taking the time in the day and doing this. I know the schedules don't always work, but hey, here we are, and thank you guys for watching. Whether you're watching us live now or you're gonna catch us on our Sundays recast on YouTube, make sure to follow the Modern Nerd. We thank you, and we're happy to have you. So, D23 happened over the weekend, and it had some good stuff. I think it didn't live up to what I was expecting, but then again, their expectations and who the fuck am I to tell Disney what to do? I was kind of expecting like a Guardians of the Galaxy and a few other trailers that were done at what was that? What was the last one we did? We reviewed it, and I don't even remember. San Diego Comic-Con. They had trailers at San Diego, and the public didn't get to see them, only the people there. And the same thing happened. They kind of showed another Guardians trailer, and there was like an Indiana Jones 5 trailer, and there was a bunch of things that happened that we don't get to see, and it's kind of annoying. I get it, like, exclusivity, but like fucking show it to the rest of us. The stuff we did get to see was kind of cool. We got one I'm pretty sure you guys didn't watch. Maybe George did, but there was a Werewolf by Night
I did
trailer,
watch
which
it.
which I am
I
excited
watched them
for.
all.
It looks fun. It looks interesting because it's just different and goofy. There's a man thing in there for a moment, so I'm excited that he's finally getting some comeuppance. And then Werewolf by Night was a very interesting character in the comics a long time ago. So I don't know a lot about it, but it's this black and
Whatever.
white trailer, and it looks very like campy and cheesy, like it's old school horror from like the 50s, back in like like Bela Lugosi days and like shit like that. And so it looks interesting. I'm not saying I'm like, but like it's different, and anything that's different, anything that's different is kind of fun for me. Um, there was two big things that happened. Um, there was the Thunderbolts cast that was announced. They came out and talked about it, and it's pretty close to what everybody expected. Here's the breakdown, and then we'll talk about it for a second. We got Julie Louis-Dreyfus coming in as Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, or Madame Hydra, if you will. David Harbour reprising his role as Red Guardian. Apparently, her name was Hannah John Kamen as Ghost. Wyatt Russell's back as John Walker, Sebastian Stan obviously as Bucky Barnes, Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova, and Olga Kurylenko, excuse me, I apologize for that butchering of that name, as Taskmaster. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Apparently, at this point,
The captain's the most evil person on that list, which is funny.
what's his name?
U.S. agent.
U.S.
U.S.
agent.
agent. There you go.
Yeah, pretty much. The only one who. It's funny because they all had a quote unquote redemption moment, but like his was the cheapest of all of them because it just was forced upon us and we had to accept it whether we liked it or not, apparently. And nobody liked it, I'll tell you that much. So
He's great though. I mean, the
he
actor's
is.
fantastic. So
I'm excited to
it'll be
see
good.
more of him, and I'm excited to see, especially. I guess, yeah, him on the big screen because he's the only one that hasn't been in a movie yet. He's only been on the small screen, so that's cool that we get to see that and get to flesh out Madame Hydra's character, Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character.
See,
I think she could be interesting.
am I the only one thinking there's not enough evil in this supposed evil group?
Yeah, I wouldn't
Where's
be
the
surprised
evil
if
man?
more people are going to be added because
I
there's
hope
definitely
so.
there's definitely two people who are obviously missing. One of them being Zemo, who we all thought would actually be leading the team, and then the other one is obviously Abomination. So who maybe they were just holding off because they don't want to spoil the ending of She-Hulk for some reason or something like that. Maybe they have their reasons not to reveal a full cast. And obviously, if they try to do it the same way that DC did, maybe they might have a slightly more rotating cast. So like after like, you know, yeah,
That would
more
make
than one
sense.
after one movie, it might actually rotate and other people will switch in and out, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus will just switch people in like a, you know, like chessboard style for parts when she needs it. You know, maybe, you know, it could be a very fluid team, quote unquote, as opposed to very like specific. Oh, only these people are like on the team. You know, so I'm open to that. Future iterations where other people could show up on the team and add it, or other people leave, totally possible. I think.
I hope
I
so.
want to see if I can find this. Is this it? In the comics, I actually read a bunch of Thunderbolts and I really loved it. And it wasn't Ross's Thunderbolts at the time that I was reading it. It was actually Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts, and he took he got a hold of Iron Man's. This was like when Iron Man had just run Shield, and then it like fell and got taken over, and Shield was disappearing
into the ground.
And then Norman got the Iron Man armor and became Iron Patriots and was the head of the Thunderbolts. And you had I think it was Mac Gargan maybe who was Venom, and he made himself look like the Black Suit symbiote. You had Bullseye who was dressed up as Hawkeye doing it, and like so there was more, and I don't remember every single one of them. There was a couple that were like obviously villains. Someone was pretending to be Thunderbird or something like that. I can't remember her name. But they all assumed like Avengers. It was really cool. I really liked it. At least I think that's what I'm describing. I could actually be describing the Dark Avengers, so I may just backtrack that entire statement.
I was thinking. I remember seeing about certain things that like Deadpool and Venom were in Thunderbolt, and a boy can dream.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
So I can see why they have Bucky, because Bucky's he's like the seasoned team veteran on there. You know, he's the Rick Flag, if you will. You know what I mean? The soldier that's going to lead everybody. You've got, you know,
they had jokes. They were saying it's funny that Bucky is the most stable person in that whole entire cast. Out of all of them, he's the you know, he's the straight guy. The rest of them are all like off their rails, and he's the one that's actually quote unquote the most stable one. And you think about that cast, and you're like, he totally is. Like that's like, what kind of messed up team is this? Because out of the rest of them, they're all like flying off the handle. Like there's no.
No, I think Red Guardian and Yelena are like all right.
They're all right, but the reason why they're right is the two of them keep. They're the two of them keep themselves to, you know, grounded. You know, I guess, but definitely like you know, there's people who have a lot of unresolved issues on this team, and Bucky is actually the only one who had quote unquote issues are more resolved.
He worked through a lot of them.
He worked through a lot of his issues during Winter Soldier.
I'm excited. Just give me more David Harbour, and I'm a happy man. So I'm fine.
There's nothing I can say bad about that. I was so glad that he's like, I couldn't think you know those things that you like get but you didn't even know to ask for. That was a thing that I got that I didn't know to ask for, and I'm just like, I'm so here for this. I'm so glad.
It's good. The other thing that happened that was worth, there's a lot more. If you want to go check it out, they got all their stuff on their YouTube and you could read all these articles. But the other thing that's worth talking about, for me at least, is the Secret Invasion trailer, which I keep forgetting is a TV show that they're doing, you know, a Disney Plus show. I keep thinking it's going to be a movie, but it's not. It's a show. So I got to put for whatever reason, my brain is like, it's a movie, and I'm like, no, it's a show. So, but they showed the trailer, and it looked cool. It looked very cool. It was a very action-packed trailer. It set a little bit of tone. Yes, it was a teaser in that sense, but they showed it was a lot of like jump cuts and like into these quick moments where there's going to be a lot of like tension in the scene. Maybe not like full on fighting and action, but you kind of got that vibe. And I'll be the first to say it reluctantly. George, you were right. It's a rogue sect of Skrulls. Who are working against the general populace of the Skrulls, which makes perfect sense. And yeah, it's exactly what we expected. And you know, we get a look at Emilia Clarke in there, who still don't know who she is. Looks like some kind of agent for somebody, SHIELD or otherwise. And we get Olivia Colman, a look at her, who is someone of power. I don't know if she's like a prime minister or a head of like a British Secret Service or something, but we get to see that kind of stuff in there. Anything for more of both of those people, and I'm there. Especially Olivia Colman, she's a true powerhouse and a great actress in her right. So excited for that. Yeah, it looked cool. Again, you know, they didn't show us a whole lot. Hopefully, we kind of start to get like some Super Skrulls, which is kind of a cool thing, which would really kind of move it into the realm of the Fantastic Four, because the Super Skrull had all the powers of the original Fantastic Four group. So he had like one big rock arm, his other one could like stretch, and he could light part of himself on fire and go invisible and stuff. So it was, you know, that was a cool thing. And then more extraterrestrial stuff. Hopefully some of this takes place in space and we get more aliens and more exposure to that part and bring more of this into the MCU, because that's really what it's been missing a lot of for me is more depth in space other than the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. But yeah, thoughts? I think George saw it.
There was a scene, there was a quick look at Everett Ross. Ross is in this apparently.
Who?
And Everett Ross.
General Ross?
Everett Ross? From the CIA, aka Wakanda. Black Panther movie.
Martin Freeman.
Not Thunderbolt Ross. Everett Ross, the CIA guy.
Yep, you get him.
So there was a quick.
You get Rhodey.
Yeah, Rhodey's in it, which I was really surprised. I didn't expect him to be in this, but I guess this makes sense because this is gearing up for things like Armor Wars and Ironheart.
Yeah, they talked a little bit about Armor Wars and how it's going to go from like Ironheart and it has Don Cheadle in it, and then boom, he gets Armor Wars, and I'm like, all right, yeah,
he's gonna go right into it.
Makes sense.
This is interesting because, you know, there have been, I mean, let's just be honest, there have been main characters in the MCU and there are ancillary characters in the MCU, and they try very hard to introduce new characters and make them part of the main characters in the MCU. That's like one of the hardest things to get well done. Within the last 2 or 3 phases, Spider-Man might be the only quote unquote most successful one of like who was an ancillary and now is a main MCU character. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that I feel like that's an unfair one.
That's an unfair advantage because he's Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, he's like
it's not fair. So it's incredibly difficult for you to supplant a Thor or a Tony Stark or a fucking Captain America. It's damn near impossible. Do you know what I'm saying? And someone who, I hate to say it, has been an ancillary character from the beginning is Nick Fury. You know, he, like Scarlet Witch, like Hawkeye, and like Hulk before him, is now finally getting his chance to have his own like TV show or his own feature thing, you know, and it's a spy thriller, and it's in a way it's this is Samuel L. Jackson's chance to like now for what, almost 15 years of it's going to be about more than 10 years of stuff for him, you know, from being NMC because he was in the first Iron Man. He's finally getting his due, and they're giving him his chance to really helm a whole entire project. So I'm all for it.
It's good.
Good for
Good
him.
shoulders to rest on.
Yeah, because he makes it look like he's a dark. Like this is Nick Fury in a place that we've never seen him before. Forget Winter Soldier where he was getting shot at. That's one thing. Shield falling. I think that's one thing. But this is like something that's even more out of his control than I think he's ever been. So it's really interesting to see Nick in this situation.
Yeah, I would have liked like how they did Black Widow and they went back and told us a story. Like I want to know like from the events of Winter Soldier to the events of Endgame, like what was Nick doing then? Like give me like that would be a cool
the big
story,
question is
like,
how long after that Spider-Man
Shield.
reveal, how long has Nick been how long has Nick been off planet? How long has Nick been replaced by a Skrull? This whole, that's the big question, right? And I think that hopefully the show will answer that.
We get what we get, and they may start off with like a little, this is what he's been doing, but it'll be like a tail end of what he's doing probably. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, again, there's stuff to look forward to in the MCU. I think we're at the turning point. We've got Black Panther coming up, and there's a bunch more movies in the next few years. So I'm excited for that again. But again, I always am. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of today's episode. I finally, this was a lot, was my fault. I finally caught up on all of the House of the Dragon. I watched the last one yesterday's for you guys this morning, or right up until 6 o'clock for me, because it's noon for you, whatever. So that one's super fresh in my mind, but I did watch the other two back to back. So I've got them pretty fresh, and yeah. Stuff has happened, I guess, maybe, sort of. They're kind of. It's okay. It's interesting because there's I don't even know how to start with this show right now. The first episode we talked about on the last one,
yeah,
and it was slow.
Smart,
but like what they're doing is they're jumping like between the first and the second episode. There was 6 months. Between the second and the third episode, there was 3 years. And between the third and the fourth episode, there was another 3 years. Yet everybody, except for Matt Smith, looks exactly the same. Nobody has aged a day in 7 years. Anyway, so I get why they're doing that, because they're going to try and get us this Targaryen story. But they just sort of mention it in passing, and it kind of bothers me, because they were just like, oh, that problem with his daughter, that was 3 years ago. And I was like, it was like up until the moment.
There was 4 years between episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah, because they talk about how they attempted to marry off Rhaenyra to the son of the Valerian guy. And in the beginning of that episode, they were like, "Oh, that business with the Valerians, that was years ago, with his son." I'm like, "What? Like, what?"
Wait, so how long did it take from Daemon defeating the crab?
A couple years.
But he defeated him at the end of that episode, so it took him 3 years to sail to King's Landing.
No, he was still, after he defeated the crab guy, he still was cleaning up the Narrow Sea. It took him 3 years to like kill all the pirates, and
that's my understanding. Again, this is that's the thing for me with this show is like it's just Game of Thrones had you were telling multiple stories of these characters and these houses and everything, but like everything is so solely focused on the Targaryens that what's happening with the House of Valerian, I don't get to see. Tell me what they're plotting. Tell me more than just one scene why Daemon wants to go with that Valerian guy. Like it just needed.
I like to think there's a reason for that.
I'd hope so.
A reason to be revealed. Though based on what we've seen so far, probably not. I get into it. I think that third episode was actually really good, and I was very into it. This last episode, I just felt uncomfortable most of the time, and I don't like feeling uncomfortable. That's not a feeling that I enjoy. So it's hard for me to objectively gauge the last episode because it was just all about scandal and young women, being pawned off and having sex. So it's hard for me to gauge. Yeah, it's hard for me to gauge. But it's I get into it. I'd say most of the time until he brings out the fucking dagger and he's like, the prince that was promised. I'm like, oh yeah, you mean the thing that never pans out and has absolutely no consequence on this whole thing that it's leading up to? I hate it. I hate the reminders of how awful the ending of Game of Thrones is. And I don't know why they're sticking with it. They know how terribly and how reacted, like we all, I don't know. I don't understand why they keep going back to that. Like, you need to I think that is like the biggest flaw of this show. Like, why remind us of this prince that was promised when everyone is fully aware that nothing comes of it?
Prince that was promised?
It's Jon Snow. Our R plus something equals J. So R plus L. So whatever. I get into it, and then the second that comes back up, the prophecy, I'm just like, oh, I mean the prophecy that has absolutely zero consequence over everything, right? Yeah, real excited about that. I don't know why they. Anyway, I think Tim mentioned, I don't know, last time we recorded that maybe it's a different one. Maybe there's one before Jon Snow, and like that's literally like my 1% of smidge of a hope that's what's happening. But
maybe it's the Mad King.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, after the first episode, they were like, season 2. Like they're already renewed and doing a season 2, regardless.
I mean, it's
of anything.
Still ridiculously popular because of
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. It's. I think the further if they could move away from like the ending of Game of Thrones,
they're not going to.
I know they can't, but like if they just like kind of like forget about the prophecy, like we don't care, like have this be its own thing, I think I'd be about 20% more into it, and I'm already pretty into it for the most part. It's fine. It's not blowing me away like Game of Thrones did, but it's like an enjoyable show, and
it is enjoyable.
I just it's hard for me to get into it.
I think the problem is and this I wanted to tie it into like Lord of the Rings, but I think the thing is like Game of Thrones gave this show like a good launching pad, and it gets a slight pass in a way that a lot of other shows who don't have that advantage. You know what I'm saying? People are more willing to stick with it, and it's a question of like how willing and how well the show can balance that, that you already have this built-in fan base for a show to begin with. So like, are you going to take advantage of that? And how much can you gauge of like what the audience is willing to put up with before you lose them? Do you know what I'm saying? So that's a double-edged sword on their part. I understand that. The advantage is that people are already like, they know a large audience will just buy into the show to begin with, so they can slow build their story, and that's I think that was my biggest complaint to begin with, is that like you're finding it difficult in those first 3 or 4 episodes to invest in any of these characters or really care that much about them. And like, what is the point of the show is one of the big questions, right? And I think the second part is also, if you want to find a main protagonist, I think obviously, Rhaenyra is a very like sympathetic character, but the problem is like, for her to be truly sympathetic, there has to be more at stake than just being a woman in a man's world. I'm not saying that that's not a compelling storyline, but that can only carry the show so far. It's a played out trope, and we've seen it before, and we saw it in the last series. So what's the fucking point of showing us this thing again? You know what I'm saying? Yep. Give me a fucking reason to root for her other than the fact that she's a woman in a man's world. because I've seen that fucking shit before. And it didn't play out right the last time. You know, whatever point you were trying to point out last time, you fucked it up at the end. So if you're going to do that again, then I don't want to watch the show. And I don't have a point of watching the show. And it looks very badly because the thing is it kind of looks like it's going that direction again. Regardless of how this plays out. It already kind of looks like it's already going that direction again. So, that this girl's just ultimately going to get screwed anyways. Despite all her like girl power struggle.
Reminders to all parents to wait until the show ends before you start naming your children different names of the House of Targaryen.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, obviously, after episode 4, you can see what the House of Targaryen is about. After episode like 3, you can see what the House of Targaryen is about, because they tried to like marry off Rhaenyra to her fucking brother.
Right. There's a lot of like, and I understand Smirch. I understand Smirch is saying a lot of like he just was like uncomfortable. Like the show is trying to push, like the show is trying to raise some things, especially the last episode, of like moral gray lines, right? And like what is it that you're willing to put up with? What is it like putting yourself in their shoes and in their space and saying, well, these things are okay because they're Targaryens and whatever, and like it's, but then also bringing our outside view and being like, it's not fair that she's not allowed to do this because she's a woman, you know? It's like, okay, so like we're gonna give Daemon a pass because he's a Targaryen and we can put ourselves in his shoes, but for some reason like we're all up in arms because like everyone in that society is like following their traditions and doesn't want a woman to be a queen. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's this like, okay, are you willing to like swallow that pill? And it's like, that's like when it comes down to it, that's where I find the quote unquote uncomfortableness of this whole entire thing. And it's doing it on purpose. And I don't know if it's for a point or if it's just so that they can get people fucking talking on Twitter and like get hyped for the show. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is it like gratuitous, or is it just because like they're trying to do it for a reason and they're trying to like purposely make you feel that way for a reason?
I hope it's for a reason, for fuck's sake. But
I think they're gonna Sean Bean it and blow past her time in the show. Like, not blow past, but like at the end of the first season, everyone's like, oh, Sean Bean's like your antagonist for the most part, or protagonist. Everyone's like, oh, cool, let's go for, you know, this guy. I don't even remember his name at this point anymore. And then whack, there goes his head. You know what I mean? And you're like, whoa, that shifted the entire tone. Who do I focus on? What's the point? Where am I going to go from there? And it left you kind of grasping for a hero, if you will, for lack of a better term, for a protagonist, for someone to get behind. And then, you know, in this one, you've got pretty much the only person you're going to get behind is Rhaenyra. I mean, there's sometimes you feel a little bad for Viserys just because of the position he's in, but I just think he's not a great king, so whatever. And then I think for me, what I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of course corrected. Everyone knows how Rhaenyra ends, and none of these people live. You know, they'll get to her death and then continue in the Targaryen line and tell that story. I think that's what these time jumps are about. Is they're gonna get us through this story with interesting characters. I'm genuinely intrigued by most of these characters. I think the acting is pretty damn good from everybody, you know, as to be expected from something of this caliber and this level. So I'm you know, when I'm watching this, yes, it's a little slow for me, don't get me wrong, but I am there. I am watching. I'm like, oh, actually, you know, Rhaenyra, oh, an interesting character. Oh, and then her friend is now the queen, and like all this shit is happening, and I'm like, okay, yeah. It's easier to follow because it is only one house, whereas with like Game of Thrones, there's like 17 houses, and I'm like, who the fuck is that guy? Oh, you saw him 4 episodes ago for 20 seconds. I'm like, I don't fucking know, you know. So this is a little bit easier for me to digest.
That totally is Game of Thrones, though.
Yeah, that's really what it was. I just like, everyone's like, oh, you don't remember this from season 4? I'm like, I don't even. There was a 4. Like, I don't even. It was just so much happening all at once that this is a little more streamlined, and I kind of appreciate that for my particular intake style, you know. Like, it was, for not knowing the history of this family, I feel like I know more about the history of this family than any house in the realm of Game of Thrones, and they went pretty deep with the lore on some of those houses, and I just had to intake, and there was no, it was a lot. But yeah, I mean, did a lot happen in these last 4 episodes? No. Not really, in my opinion. You know, they jumped some years. You had one cool battle scene that was the only action you got in 4 episodes. Um, that was pretty sweet. I wanted more of like, Damon in the cave. Like he goes in to fight the Crab King,
Right.
and then comes out
that
just
what a missed opportunity.
completely covered. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Like,
Boss
I
fight,
see
dude.
Matt
Give
Smith
us the-
slash
give us
that
the
dude in
boss
half.
fight.
I don't understand why they didn't do that fight. I bet you they
That was
filmed
so-
it inside the cave and
They
it
ran out
looked
of money.
terrible and it was dark, and then they were like, well, let's just fucking cut it.
we're not going to do an episode, 6 of season 8 again, where you can't see anything, in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. I bet
So,
you it looked terrible
whatever
when they cut
episode
it.
it
I wanted
mean-
that fight, dude.
I bet you it would look
One-on-one
terrible.
fights are what I live for in Game of Thrones. Like you get to see people's styles and like.
It's a barrister Selmy fucking breaking out the
this is a lot
sword.
more. This is as much. It's funny because my early complaints of the original Game of Thrones series was there's not enough fantasy. Like, give me more dragons, give me more zombies, give me more that. Like, it was built up as a fantasy show, and it's just a medieval politics show for most of that show, and it's just politics from that era. And you started off this one, you got dragons, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you got some of that stuff, and now it's turning into more, it is politics and everything like that. Like, I feel like it's as much, like The Walking Dead should be called The Talking Dead, because it's just a bunch of people sitting around talking, and then, oh, look, a zombie. Like, that's pretty much what this is it's like a bunch of people talking, and you're like, oh, dragon flew over. Like,
Is
like
there
that's,
That
already
really
a
is.
show after Walking Dead called Talking Dead?
I know, that's what I'm
There's a
saying. It's like they
podcast called
should have done it the other way. And
the
it was-
after show.
yeah, but it's just like, that was the big joke of Walking Dead, was there's no zombies in it anymore. It's just people arguing the whole time.
It's funny that you say that there's so much like Game of Thrones required a lot of like intake and stuff like that, and it's like Game of Thrones was one of those shows that it required like additional reading, like like you kind of had to like take a step back, or you had to check something to like kind of get everyone's story straight. It was difficult just to get it straight from watching the show, like all the characters and who's who, because there's
Like
so many storylines. You had to get something additional reading, right? Like And I think this is the question of like, in this genre, and especially with material that's already it's out there, whether it's books or other, graphic novels and things like that, source material that's already out there, right? So like, I think Game of Thrones is lucky in many ways because, again, it has that ability, it has that built-in audience for people who are willing to read extra and go that extra bit of step to figure out what's going on in the show. And I kind of question whether or not, like, how do I say this nicely? I wonder if like this is necessary for House of the Dragon.
Nicely.
I wonder if it's
You
necessary to
evil-
do. I
What
wonder
show
if
are
it's
you
necessary
on?
to do for House of the Dragon. Like, how much people are enjoying the show who don't want to do extra reading? You know what I'm saying? And do they even understand what the fuck is going on? Right? And then
Although I did some
want to
extra
compare that to. I want to compare
But
that
it's
also
like-
to like the problem with like other TV shows like that too, or other movies that are like that too, and also segueing kind of into Lord of the Rings, which is like, I don't want to fucking be a token head in order to have to enjoy the show, and it seems like that's the problem with that show, and that's the question with Game of Thrones and
haven't
also
seen
House
it,
of the
so-
Dragon. Do I have to be a fucking hardcore Game of Thrones fan in order for me to enjoy House of the Dragon, or can I still enjoy it without it? I'm a pretty hardcore Game of Thrones fan, so like I understand a lot of backstories. I've read all the books, so I really am enjoying Game of Thrones in that box. Do you know what I'm saying? As a hardcore Game of Thrones fan, I love it. I think House of the Dragon is really
I don't
interesting
think
for me.
so.
But
I think you can get by.
Yeah,
so where is that scale?
did
I think,
reading-
do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is your tolerance as somebody who's not a Game of Thrones fan? Can you enjoy this
I
show?
think you can. I think if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, you'll like it more because you won't have that bitter taste in your mouth. If you didn't watch the
Yeah.
original series,
Actually,
that's a
you
good
won't-
point.
You won't know. I think it is more designed for people who don't, because like when I say I did a little extra reading, all I did was look at like the Targaryen family tree. So I was like, all right, who's like, they mentioned someone that sounded like my real name, so I was like, oh, I want to see what that guy is, and so I just glanced
At the family tree,
and
yeah.
I was
It's
like,
kind of nice
okay,
to also
it's
to
a little
see like
confusing
how
when you get past where we are to like
Yeah.
between here and Daenerys. I'm like, there's a lot that happened.
there's a lot.
but
There's a lot.
other than
It's a
that,
few
like,
hundred years.
I follow what's happening. I can name most of the characters in this show right now. When I was watching Game of Thrones, I couldn't keep track of the
Yeah.
characters' names. I couldn't do it. And so I think, look, I loved Game of Thrones because I think the first, the majority of it I think was done very well. There's ups and downs, good and bad mixed within, minus if we're not talking about season 8. They did something different for television and changed the way stories should be told, and I think this is kind of building on that in a sense where it's like, okay, look, here's Game of Thrones was like, we're going to tell you all these storylines and just bring them together, sort of. Let's pretend they brought it together nice and neat at the end. And what they're doing here is they're like, all right, we're going to kind of take just one thread and just walk along that line, and it's working a little bit better. It's easier to digest and take in, not the subject matter, but the history and the family tree and
And
like,
to follow,
what's happening.
yeah.
I can follow the politics that are happening here, somewhat because I have watched it, because they're mentioning like, oh, House Valerian, and like, oh, Targaryens, and they're talking about like, all these other houses. You had Baratheons and like everything. So I'm like, all right, oh, I know that name. That's his thing. So
Seems like this show you can narrow it down to like a handful of people that you must know. But you cannot say that. You cannot say that about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, you need to know more than 5 characters on that show. In this show, you could probably get away with just knowing 5 characters in the show and kind of follow the plot. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're like, list 5 people on the show that you know. And you're like, oh yeah, Matt Smith. Viserion.
Yeah.
Freaking
Name 5
The
characters.
Hand.
Matt Smith.
Matt Smith, Matt Smith, Matt Smith,
Rhaenyra.
Matt Smith,
And then Alicent
and-
Hightower. There you go. That's 5 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good, dude. You know what happened? I went and
Those are the
I
only
fell
five
down the
people you
black
know.
hole. That's true. The other day I fell down a black hole of like hating on Game of Thrones again, and I like watched like a bunch of stuff, and I watched like the honest trailers from like parts 1, 2, and 3 of the show. And there's the part where they say, "Can you name this character?" And he's like, And back when I was watching it, I could, and I was at maybe like I probably would have gotten a C plus if I was being graded. I couldn't remember everybody. I was like, oh shit.
It's funny
it
because
becomes, it becomes that that meme from what's his name? Oh, DiCaprio was like, it's like,
Yeah.
I recognize him. That guy, like that's what it is.
Well,
you just recognize.
I
things.
feel
But
like
this
they
show
make
is-
fun
everyone
of that,
except-
right? Like Tormund at the end, when Tormund is talking to Jon Snow in that last season, I feel like we're all
I had
Tormund, where
to,
he's
for a
like the
second,
way
be like,
he
who the fuck
referred to
is
the
Tormund?
queens.
Yeah.
He's like, which queen is it? The one that fucks his brother, or the one with the dragons? And I feel like the first few seasons of the show, you didn't know anyone's name. You're like, what's his
that's
name? Is
true.
he the guy that fucked his sister, or like what about the guy that was like the fat king, and then like who? And then there's the guy
Tormund
that's
was
gay, and
everyone.
then there's like the little jerk on the, you know what I'm saying? Like you didn't know nobody's name really for those first few like seasons. I hate to say
like-
it, that
I like
cast
Red
was so
Woman.
huge.
It's weird. Some names I just remember because of how epic the names are. Like I couldn't remember Sir Davos, but I remembered Beric Dondarrion.
Beric
because that name
Dondarrion.
is epic as fuck. He's the dude with the eye patch that looks
Yeah, of course.
Life.
Oh,
Yeah.
He's got the
yeah.
fire god or whatever.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
now that part in the I love Astra. It's like when he does the fire sword thing. It's like, oh, now you bring out the fire sword.
Yeah.
We've been fucking cold this whole time. Oh man.
Needless to say, I can probably hate on this, or I can probably love on it. I could pick a side and argue
Yeah,
both for this
it's-
show, which is a good thing, because then
Mhm.
I can, I'm right there. I want to know where this goes. Like, yes, I know where it goes, but I want to see how it gets there. You know what I mean?
gonna
Like,
say
I'm intrigued.
I'm in, but every time you make a reference to the ending of Game of Thrones, the main show, I'm immediately pulled away. Like I'm into it. Like it's fine. Everything's fine. Like I'm enjoying this show, and like not on a crazy level, but I'm enjoying this show. and,
Tim,
and until you bring out the fucking knife that says the princess was promised, like, and then I'm just like, oh right, like
I'm glad
thanks
I
for
have a
reminding
bad
me.
memory because like I always forget that there was even a prophecy in the origin in Game of Thrones because there was a bunch of prophecies that were thrown around. One of which
For the
was
night is
that
dark and full of terrors.
I swear, and I could be remembering this wrong, but I swear in the original there was the prophet, some lady prophet who talked to what's her name, Queen Regent, Joffrey's mom. I can't even remember her fucking name.
Cersei.
Cersei,
The one
who
that
was
fucks
like,
his brother.
yeah. But there was a prophecy where it's like you will die by the hands of your older brother, and both of her brothers were born and are technically older than her. But which one
Mm.
is the oldest? And there was that question, like all that stuff, and I was like, oh, cool. And then it kind of turned into you will die in the hands of your brother because they got, and I'm like, does nobody remember that? They forgot that they wrote this, and then they're like, oh yeah, they'll hug at the end, so they're touching. Like it was just a lot that just
Dude, the famous
was the one
scene
thread.
of the famous thing with was, I think it was David Benioff was like, oh yeah, I guess Daenerys forgot about the Iron Fleet. Like she she forgot, or
Or
you
you
forgot.
forgot.
Like I think you forgot. Stop saying your care. Oh yeah, actually Tim, that prophecy, the lady that told, she forgot to mention that it was like in the hands, not by the hands of her brother. It wasn't the showrunners. The character misspoke. It's like, guys, fucking, where's the accountability? Anyway,
Yeah. No, it's a whole thing.
it's gonna be hard for me to
Um,
not turn this into a Game of Thrones hate fest every
I
time we
mean,
talk about
it's
this.
been it's been all right so far. You're not as heated as normal, so that's good. That's good. Let's do them. Let's wake up more fresh like that, and then you don't have to feel all of it.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. I don't know. Tim teased the other week possibly doing a hot takes episode, and
but like not on this. I had just random hot takes.
no, yeah, no, and I would, obviously that is like a topic I'd love to do, and I kind of realized, so I don't really have like that hot of a take on
You want?
anything,
It's not so much like
unless it's like outside of the realm of nerd stuff, unless it's a completely random hot
No,
take.
Batman
here's
Forever
what's
was the
here's
best Batman.
yeah, like there's a hot take, you know what I mean? In lieu of losing the subject, my hot take, what brought it around was me saying Davy Jones in the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie was the pinnacle of CGI, and everything from there has been downhill.
That's funny.
That's,
But I
you
don't
can
know
argue
what to
that.
say to that. That's not
I
a
don't know.
hot take
Like,
because I don't even know what to argue.
I just watched it again the other day, and it
great.
looks more real than anything I've seen to this date. I mean, there's some beautiful looking things. Avatar was
Okay.
cool, and like there was all this other shit that happened, but I swear to God, that was the best CGI use ever. And then like 10 minutes later in the movie, some shitty scene happened, and I was like, wow. So, yeah. But
I
like
don't know
that
what to
character.
say.
Anyway, we can
That's
get
good.
into a bunch of other random hot takes. You know what I mean?
I look
Like
forward to it. I look forward to
so
it.
look forward to that in the future. Is more
Yeah.
more topics is what's in the future. We're going to do a lot of these review ones and expect a lot of that. So if you like our takes on these shows and our movies, we're happy to tell you. We're happy to talk about them. It's what we do. We've been doing this for George and I have been doing this for almost 25 years. Dan and I have been doing it, what, 10, 15 years. Like this is what we do, and we decided to bring everyone else into it. So join us, chat with us, leave comments. We want to talk to you guys and talk to you ladies
Help me, help you,
and you
help me.
everybody else. However you identify, we want to talk to you. We have maybe we'll have a hot takes next week, but look for another Game of Thrones. These should probably be coming out around Mondays. I'm probably just going to do a quick edit and throw them up so you guys can watch them and enjoy them. I've got a new Versus coming out next weekend on Saturday, so check that out when it comes out. Watch my follow the socials and you'll see when it's coming out. Other than that, I don't have much else. Any other final thoughts, gentlemen? No? Awesome. Then as always, we have been the Modern Nerd, and thank you for watching.